John Steenhuisen has won the DA leadership race with 80% of the votes cast. He was elected at the party's first ever virtual elective congress. He ran against KwaZulu-Natal member of the legislature, Mbali.
Delegates, 88.6% of you have voted in this Congress election. And the new leader of the Democratic Alliance is John Steenhuisen.
Well, there you have it. Over 80% of the vote, and that's how much John Steenhuisen has won this election by. Let's bring into the conversation now our politics editor here at Newzroom Afrika, SbuNgalwa. Sbu, that margin, we don't have the finer details, we have the percentage, and it's over 80%.
Actually, I can tell you that I'm still confused. I'm not sure whether the 80% is the total votes cast or whether it's the breakdown, because the DA has not given us that. So I'm still not sure.
That breakdown.
Whether it is the number of votes of the total candidate, of the total delegates that voted.
Yeah.
They haven't clarified that one. But either way, I think it doesn't take away from John Steenhuisen's win and what it represents for him. And the point you were making earlier on when you asked earlier whether Mbali should have stood against him, I think it was still important. The fact that she lost does not negate the importance of testing internal processes. In fact, I think her campaigning, even in as much as John Steenhuisen says that she gave him a hard time, in as much as the DA establishment, the DA leadership and past leaders would have wanted John to have smooth sailing, by Mbali contesting actually legitimized internal democracy within the DA. Because ordinarily, short of her contest, you would have had a John Steenhuisen who has the party's leadership on a silver platter.
Yeah. The margin of this victory between the two candidates, some have suggested that it will give us some view about where the DA is going in terms of its policy trajectory and whether or not it is really interested in growing outside of its normal base and really keen on targeting black voters. Where do you stand on that argument?
Now, the thing about the DA is that even when it had a black Muslim money, because Helen Zille had assumed that in 2014 the DA did very well, and in terms of white voter support, I would say the DA saturated its white voter support. So the next level for the DA and Helen Zille was that it needed to attract black voters, and then she thought that a black leader would be the one who appeals to them. But if you look at the 2019 elections, they actually showed you that even a black face of a Muslim man did very little to convince black voters that the DA is a home for them. So the same thing applies, even if Mbali had won. It's not automatic that because she's a young black woman and a smart one at that, and an articulate politician at that it would be enough to turn them and to get them to support the DA. I think in terms of its policies and the policies that it adopts, it is those policies that actually can determine whether the DA would be able to convince the ordinary black voter whether it is the party for them or not. Here's a case in point. On the issue of labor market reforms, they talk about, DA is quite clear about being free, supporting the free market. And they're talking about bringing down the public wage bill. Of course, it's huge. But that directly puts them on collision course with COSATU and all the unions. So the policies of that party are the ones that determine whether it is able to convince ordinary South Africans that it represents them or not.
Let's bring into this conversation Herman Pretorius, and he is with the Institute of Race Relations. Mr. Pretorius, thank you very much for making the time to speak to us here on Newzroom Afrika. And your reaction, John Steenhuisen is elected the leader of the Democratic Alliance. Your thoughts thus far?
Well, I must say that a few things from Steenhuisen being elected really stand out for me. The first thing is the rejection of the idea by the DA that only a black leader can attract black support, because I think Sbu is absolutely correct in his analysis that you can only get so far with minority votes, white, Indian and coloured votes in South Africa if you are serious about forming a national government, or even governments in places like Gauteng. You need to be able to appeal to black voters. And I think the election of a white man as the leader of the DA, to my mind, is a welcome development of the DA saying, we are going to take the issues facing South Africans more seriously than we are going to take the political narrative that you must elect a black leader. If you look at someone like like Alan Winde in the Western Cape, it doesn't matter whether he is a white man or whether he might have been a coloured or a black man. The point is his government is performing well compared to other governments in the country, especially during this coronavirus crisis. I think the first thing is a very welcome development from the DA making a very brave decision to say that we are not going to elect someone based on race, we are going to elect someone based on their competence for the role and the trust we have in them. And then the second point is that I think that was a very good speech by Mr. Steenhuisen, and for the first time in a long while, there's a very stark difference between the ANC and the DA in terms of what is the role of the state, what is the role of the citizen, and how can you get prosperity and success going for the entire country.
And what was that stark difference?
The stark difference, I think it is the ANC is very much a command economy party. They've been adopting the National Democratic Revolution every year or every 4 years or 5 years, I can't remember exactly what the time period is, of their conferences since 1952, with the command economy, the state playing a central role in economic activity, very much a pillar of ANC policy. And I remember last year in August in Parliament when Mr. Ndlozi of the EFF, Dr. Ndlozi, I should say, of the EFF, asked President Ramaphosa where should the state be in terms of the economy of the country. President Ramaphosa said at the center of it. And what we heard from Mr. Steenhuisen just now was that the state should take a backseat when it comes to economic participation, economic activity, and it really should be about the individual citizens and their freedom to participate in a free.
Herman, let me throw this question to you before I put it to my colleague here in studio with me. John Steenhuisen, will he manage to be his own man? Will he manage to lead the DA as best he could, keeping in mind that there is the Helen Zille factor that has been a problem for this party, I think, ever since the leadership change with the departure of Mmusi Maimane?
I think so. I think he will be able to be his own man. And I think one of the places where Mr. Steenhuisen being his own man has manifested so far is in his appointment of Gwengwenya again as head of policy for the DA. Now, that is a decision, an appointment for the leadership to have made. And Mr. Maimane made that appointment, but then, Gwengwenya became unhappy with the situation and the role policy played in the party's discussions heading into the 2019 election. But I must say, the problem, I think, for someone like Helen Zille is she is a very strong personality with many, many decades in the public sphere, in the public eye. And I think it is a challenge for her to, as it were, use her words, stay in her lane. But I think so far, I think she has managed to stay in her lane. Because if you think about who has led the DA publicly during this coronavirus lockdown, It really has been the voice of Mr. Steenhuisen that has communicated the party's position and that has, I think, become the public image South Africans associate with the DA.
All right, Sbu, are you convinced that John Steenhuisen can be his own man, given that Helen Zille is also leading a particular section of, or a particular arm of the Democratic Alliance?
Look, I don't think it's that he, like a Maimane was not his own man, or that John Steenhuisen cannot be his own man. The issue here is Helen Zille and her behavior. And I would say that for a long while, she was pretty much uncontrollable within the party. And the party seemed unable to actually rein her in and discipline her. And that on its own has a bearing on the party, in as much as it reflects on Helen Zille. It also has a reflection on the party. But if you look at the Twitter streets, as I would say, it does look like that she has tempered down a bit. But we've seen this before. But it's whether Helen is able to continue with that. But more importantly, though, the position that she holds is actually a very important position. Without it being called the deputy leader, that's effectively what it is, because what it means is that when the federal leader is incapacitated, the chair of the Federal Council is the one who takes over, and pretty much it also an all-encompassing position, which also, if you're looking at comparing it to the ANC, it would look like that of a Secretary General, where she's also in charge of the entire administration. Yeah. So to try and control that kind of a person would be a difficult one, particularly because of her character and behavior.
All right, SbuNgalwa, let's pause for a moment there, and when we return, we're going to continue with this conversation, and we're hoping to have also, as part of this discussion, Sanusha Naidu, political analyst who sits all the way in Cape Town.